Hello and welcome back to another video. So today we are going to be talking about the Rugby World Cup Pool D. Okay, welcome back. So Pool D of this 2019 World Cup should be a cracking one actually. We've got some very good sides. Australia, Wales, Fiji, Georgia and Uruguay. Okay, let's have a look and see how each team has done in previous World Cups. So, Australia, 2 times winners, 2 times runner-up, with 3rd place or 4th place in 2 quarter-final appearances. Wales, they've come 3rd once, 4th once and 3 quarter-finals. Fiji have reached 2 quarter-finals. Georgia and Uruguay have unfortunately never gotten out of the group. Okay, we're going to talk about the team's recent results, and let's start with Australia. So, Australia, 2019, they've done okay. They've beaten Argentina, New Zealand and Samoa. They were brought back to earth against New Zealand after that initial Bledisloe Cup win. So I feel like there was a lot of hype in Australia about the fact that the game was played in Perth, and Australia, I feel, ambushed New Zealand a little bit. And then that was all reversed in the return fixture. New Zealand absolutely wiped the floor with them. 2018, not great by Australian standards at all, really. 2 losses against Ireland and 3 losses to New Zealand. They've also lost to Wales, England and Argentina in 2018. So you can't exactly say they're heading in the right direction, because Australian rugby lately has been on shaky ground, which is actually probably why the win against New Zealand in 2019 was highlighted, because Australia have been pretty poor. They've also been affected by off-the-field issues with Israel Folau doing his whole Twitter thing and getting involved in that, so that probably hasn't helped them. Moving on to Wales. Wales are on a very good overall trajectory. Very good wins in 2019. They've been exceptional, been extremely good. I've mentioned previously a little bit one-dimensional, and I think they could get found out against the better sides once they get out of the group. I feel like they could struggle, they might need to adapt the game a little bit. However, they are playing extremely good rugby. 2019, a few concerning losses in the warm-up games. I'm not going to look too much into them, because really warm-up games are exactly what they are, warm-up games. You want to fine-tune what you're going to bring to tournament without showing your hand completely. It's about getting guys into their routines and getting them into their positions and getting them comfortable with each other. They weren't exactly blown off the park by Ireland, but they did lose twice. 2018, good wins against the Southern Hemisphere teams. They have now got that monkey off their back. They will go into the tournament knowing that they can beat the Southern Hemisphere teams and compete with them all the way. A lot of this Wales team were also involved in the Lions tour down in New Zealand. Again, they'll get confidence from that. They would have come away from that Lions tour thinking, you know what, we can compete with New Zealand, we can compete with all those big name players. Slightly shaky Six Nations in 2018, but you know what, I feel as though Wales are on the right course, and they could go very well in this tournament. Moving on to Fiji, 2019, so far this year. They've had a pretty good year this year. One hiccup is lost to Japan. Japan seems to be upsetting a lot of the Pacific Island nations at the moment in that, because they obviously have that Sea of the Pacific Island series now. So Japan are really making strides in that. So yeah, Fiji lost to that. 2018, they've pretty standard year. Won the games you expect them to win. Lost a couple, but the big highlight of 2018 Fiji was that win away at France. That was big, and again, that with build-up and the players being together in one place and a bit of time before a game has shown that they can compete with those bigger teams, with the more resourced teams. And I watched a documentary with Dan Leo, and he did say if the Pacific Island teams can have a little bit of time together and a little bit more structure around what they're doing, they can definitely compete with the bigger end of town. Ben Ryan has also said the same thing. He obviously led the Fiji Sevens team to gold in Rio. He said exactly the same thing as Dan Leo. He said all they need is the infrastructure around the team, a bit of time together, and they will compete. And so, you know, this tournament could prove to be a big one for Fiji. Georgia, they do exactly what they say on the tin. They do extremely well against those teams that they should do well against. They very rarely lose those games against those other Tier 2 nations. Tier 1 nations, they struggle. I'm not overly surprised, to be honest. They've got a lot of players playing in France, so it's not as though their players don't know how to play against that calibre of player. As a team, though, as a nation, it is a bit different because they don't get a lot of exposure together against those higher placed sides. And I think when they do then face those bigger teams, it really does show that golfing experience more than anything else. 2018, they beat the Pacific teams, all of them except for Fiji. They lost to Fiji, so again, that was a tasty encounter in the group. And they lost to Italy, which, so again, the highlights the point I've just made. They're doing well in the games they should be doing in, but they're not taking that next step to pushing into that tier 1 level. Otherwise, 2018 was a good year for Georgia. Uruguay again, just perennial members of the Rugby World Cup cartel, simply because there's nobody else in that part of the world they're really competing. A little bit like Namibia in Africa, this is Uruguay in the Americas. There's no one else really pushing. 2018, bit hit and miss against other tier 2 teams. They had some good wins in 2019 so far, but also some concerning losses that they probably shouldn't have lost. 2018, again, same as 2019. Won the games they were expected to win, lost some of the games that maybe should have felt like they did better. And they also were absolutely smacked by Fiji. So I'm concerned for Uruguay. I really am concerned. But again, it's the case that they're here like they normally are here. 9 times out of 10, you'll see Uruguay at the World Cup. And 9 times out of 10, they're going to struggle. Again, the lack of exposure of their players, that level of rugby is going to really show again. Let's have a look about how I feel the Pool D teams are going to fare in this World Cup. I feel like Wales are going to win this pool. They've beaten Australia. They've got a lot of Lions experienced players in their squad. I feel like they're at that level now. Alan Wynne-Jones is their spiritual leader. He's going to really rip into them. They've got Dan Bigger, whose presence is growing every single year. He's just getting a little bit better. And they've got strike power all across their backline. They've got a very, very good side. They're going to target Australia. They're going to want to make a real mark in that Australia game. If they can avoid injuries and they can keep their best team on the pitch in those bigger games, they could go very far in this World Cup. Australia, I feel as though at the moment, in my mind, Australia are going to be happy to get out of the group. I feel like they're going to come second. However, Fiji could cause them some issues if Fiji get their act together. But Australia, they'll get to the quarters. And then I just feel like Australia haven't got the best team on paper by a long shot. There are a few teams that are quite a bit better than this Australia team on paper. However, Australia, being Australia, World Cups, no matter what sport it is, are going to compete. They're going to push. And they could well go quite far in this World Cup. They shouldn't. Like 2015, they shouldn't have gone to the final, but they did. And I feel as though something in my bones tells me that Australia are going to push, fight and scrap and get their way into the stage of tournament that they probably shouldn't get into. Fiji will beat Uruguay, then they'll beat Georgia, and they've got a bit of a history against Wales in terms of competing against Wales and scaring Wales, but I think Wales have too much of them this time. They will target this Australia game. I think Fiji are going to go into this Australia game thinking, we can win this, we can do it. And if they do it, then the quarterfinals is all but sewn up for them. They will need to be at their very, very best to beat Australia and to compete with Wales. But should they do that, and should they find a bit of form, and should they get their team together, and should they believe, then they could do it. I would not be surprised. I'm going to wrap up Georgia and Uruguay. No, I won't. It's a bit unfair. Georgia, unfortunately, are going to fail to progress yet again. They're going to be a little bit aggrieved that they weren't placed in Pool A, because they feel like they could probably compete with Scotland better than they compete with Wales or Australia. Again, they need, I don't know what it is, but they need something just to propel themselves to that next level. It's a little bit like Japan. This could be Japan's time. to push themselves at home World Cup. Georgia, I don't know what it is, but they need something. Georgia will be looking for 2 wins in this tournament. I think they'll be hoping to compete with Fiji, and they'll be expecting to beat Uruguay. If they come out with a win and a close game against Fiji, I think they'll be relatively happy. I think with Fiji, they have the wood slightly over Georgia lately, but they'll be trying to target 2 wins in this pool. Uruguay, well, I just don't know what to say about Uruguay. They're a little bit like the Russia of Pool A. They're just they're here to make up the numbers. Hopefully they'll provide some entertaining rugby, some running rugby, and put some highlights on the highlight reel and where they go. And it's obviously a great experience for players that are involved in Uruguay, but I don't expect them to make a dent at all in the tournament. Anyway, guys, that is Pool D all wrapped up. That is all the pool videos done and dusted. I'm going to be doing what is like a first round prediction video, which should be out hopefully sometime later on today or tomorrow. And yeah, anyway, that's Pool D. Let us know your thoughts. Who do you think is going to win this pool? Wales, Australia? Comment down below, and I'll see you for the next one.